When Chris Evans first took the role of Steve Rogers, he thought, quote, "If this movie bombs, I'm fucked. And if this movie hits, I'm fucked." Captain America Brave New World hits theaters this weekend, so here are some things I bet you never knew about Captain America the First Avenger from 2011. The story of Captain America starts with the assassination of the Archduke Ferdinand. Well, sort of, because as we all learned in history class, the Duke's killing starts World War I, which leads to fascism in Germany, and Captain America was invented as a direct response to that. There was no Marvel Comics yet when Captain America was created. There was Timely Comics, a predecessor to Marvel, run by publisher Martin Goodman. In 1940, Goodman noticed the rising popularity of superhero comic books, especially Superman, and so he hired freelancer Joe Simon to come up with a new hero for Timely Comics. Simon started by working backwards and thinking of who this character's arch rival should be. And at that time, there was no bigger villain than this guy. He also wanted to make a comic that was intentionally political. Simon was against Germany's actions at the time and wanted the US to intervene in World War II. And so he partnered with artist Jack Kirby, and they created Super American, or at least that's what Simon initially considered for his name. But then he realized there were a lot of comic book characters with super names already, so he named him Captain America. And Steve Rogers, because Roger means message received, like Roger Roger. Captain America Comics #1 debuted on December 20th, 1940, and he's punching that aforementioned guy on the cover. But the book itself introduces Red Skull as his main villain and Bucky Barnes as his teenage sidekick. It also explains his origin as a frail young man who takes a super soldier serum. Captain America was an instant hit. The first issue sold out in days, and the second issue printed 1 million copies. In 1944, Cap starred in a series of serial films, marking the very first time a Marvel character was adapted for the screen. But unfortunately, by the late 40s and 1950s, superhero comics had declined in popularity, and Captain America fell out of favor. It wasn't until the 1960s that he made a big return as a twist villain in the Avengers. It was then established that the real Captain America had been frozen in ice for decades, and Captain America books from that era, written by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, introduced Nick Fury, Peggy Carter, and Sharon Carter. Captain America then became a consistent character for Marvel Comics up through the present day. In 1979, CBS aired 2 made-for-TV Captain America movies starring Red Brown, and in 1990, Albert Pyun directed a direct-to-video Captain America movie starring Matt Salinger. In 1997, Marvel tried to get a theatrical Captain America movie off the ground, but Joe Simon sued over IP ownership rights, and that interrupted the film's development. After the lawsuit was settled in 2003, Marvel almost licensed the film rights to Warner Brothers. In those days, it was Marvel's practice to license out its characters to pre-existing studios to get movies made. So like X-Men went to Fox and Spider-Man went to Sony. But then in 2005, Kevin Feige started the in-house production company Marvel Studios, which would make movies based on the characters Marvel hadn't licensed out. Investment firm Merrill Lynch seeded the studio with $525 million, and Paramount came on board to distribute the movies in theaters. Disney would later buy Marvel in 2009 and release everything after the First Avenger. Anyway, at the outset of the studio, Feige and company made Captain America an early priority. In fact, the studio first started developing it as early as 2006. They first conceived the movie as half set in World War II and then half set in present day, and producer Avi Arad cited Back to the Future as an influence on the project. Before he started pursuing Iron Man, Jon Favreau actually pitched Marvel on Captain America, but he wanted to make it a comedy. So it's probably a good thing he chose Iron Man instead. In April 2006, Marvel hired David Self to write the Captain America screenplay, and the studio met with Joe Johnston, director of The Rocketeer and October Sky, to direct the film. It was because of those 2 movies and Johnston's special effects work on Star Wars and Indiana Jones that Kevin Feige knew he was the right man for the job. Development on the film was then delayed due to the 07-08 writer's strike, but on May 5th, 2008, the Monday after Iron Man's successful opening weekend, Marvel announced that Captain America the First Avenger was in the works, and it would be released in 2011. In 2008, the Incredible Hulk director Louis Leterrier asked to direct Captain America, but Marvel turned him down and instead finally locked in Joe Johnston. The studio then hired Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely to do a rewrite. Prior to that, they were best known for writing the 2000s Chronicles of Narnia movies. Despite Captain America's World War II origins and that the movie would be set primarily at that time, the studio wanted to lean into the comic book and fantasy world, so it decided that the villains of the movie would be the Marvel Universe's fictional German fascist, Hydra. And this led Marcus and McFeely to incorporate the Cosmic Cube, aka the Tesseract, as set up in Thor, and Howard Stark. Johnston started pre-production in late 2009, eyeing a 2010 shoot. It seems around this time the story changed to be mostly set in the 1940s, with a little bit at the end in present day. Concept artists and designers tried to make all the tech in the film period accurate, with the science fiction elements added on top. And they used real German vehicles from the time as inspiration. Red Skull's car, for example, was based on 2 Mercedes-Benz vehicles from the 30s, the 540K and the G4. Then it came time to find the cast, and practically every every young man in Hollywood went out for the role, including John Krasinski, Channing Tatum, Chase Crawford, Ryan Phillippe, Garrett Hedlund, Mike Vogel, Dane Cook, Ethan Peck, Zachary Levi, Glenn Powell, Jensen Ackles, Wyatt Russell, Sebastian Stan, and Chris Pratt. Krasinski, Tatum, and Pratt would all later show up in the MCU as different heroes, while Wyatt Russell ended up playing a different version of Captain America, John Walker, and Jensen Ackles would play a parody version of Captain America on The Boys, which also stars Chase Crawford. Sebastian Stan, meanwhile, would land the role of Bucky Barnes in The First Avenger. He was 28 at the time and is still playing the character now at 42, but for Captain America, Johnston and the studio only wanted Chris Evans. Casting director Sarah Haley Finn said he was chosen because of his humility and his ability to show vulnerability and strength. Only problem was Evans didn't want the job and he turned it down 3 times. He'd just come off playing the Human Torch in 2 Fantastic Four movies and was afraid that this role would make him too famous and affect his private life. As he explained to Entertainment Weekly, quote, "At the time, I remember telling a buddy of mine, if the movie bombs, I'm effed. If this movie hits, I'm effed. I was just scared. I realized my whole decision-making process was fear-based, and you never want to make a decision out of fear. I can't believe I was almost too chicken to play Captain America." Robert Downey Jr. helped convince him to take the role, explaining that after he did this, he'd be able to do whatever he wanted. So Evans ultimately took the job and signed a 6-picture deal. According to The Guardian, Evans got paid $300,000 for the movie. Keira Knightley, Alice Eve, and Emily Blunt were considered for Peggy Carter, but it went to Haley Atwell. Hugo Weaving was cast as Red Skull, and he said he based his accent on Werner Herzog. Stanley Tucci was cast as Dr. Erskine, and he recently said that he was insulted and flattered to get the role because Erskine was a 70-year-old character and Tucci was only 50 at the time. The studio originally approached Jeff Goldblum to play Senator Brandt, but it went to Michael Brandon. Stan Lee, of course, has a cameo as a general, and theater actor Leander Deeney was hired to be Evans' body double pre-transformation. He also has a cameo as a bartender, and British Olympic decathlete Daniel Aud served as Evans' running double. 2 months before filming, it was reported that Joss Whedon had been hired to do rewrites, as he would also be writing and directing The Avengers. Whedon said he enhanced the characters' voices and their connections. Marvel Studios set the budget for Captain America: The First Avenger at $140 million, and cameras started rolling on June 28, 2010 in the UK, under the working title Frostbite. They shot on 3 sound stages at Pinewood Studios, including its underwater stage, and 9 sound stages at Shepperton Studios. Manchester streets and Liverpool docks were turned into New York City in the 1940s. They shot war scenes at the former Royal Navy propellant factory in Carwent. A month into filming, Marvel showed very early footage from the movie at San Diego Comic-Con. And meanwhile, back in the UK, this was the peak of 3D movies, and so Johnston tried shooting the film with a 3D camera rig. After one day, he found the bulky gear, calibration issues, and limited creative options to be a nightmare, so they ended up shooting the film in regular 2D and converting it to 3D in post. How the hell did they pull off Skinny Steve with 2011 special effects technology? Well, Joe Johnston told Film Journal International exactly how they did it. Quote, "Most of the shots were done by an LA company called Lola that specializes in digital plastic surgery. The technique involves shrinking Chris in all dimensions. We shot each Skinny Steve scene at least 4 times. Once like a normal scene with Chris and his fellow actors in the scene, once with Chris alone in front of a green screen so his element could be reduced digitally, again with everyone in the scene but with Chris absent so that the shrunken Steve could be reinserted into the scene in digital, and finally with a body double mimicking Chris's actions in case the second technique were required. When Chris had to interact with other characters in the scene, we had to either lower Chris or raise the other actors on apple boxes or elevated walkways to make Skinny Steve shorter in comparison. For close-ups, Chris' fellow actors had to look at marks on his chin that represented where his eyes would be after the shrinking process, and Chris had to look at marks on the top of the other actor's head to represent their eyes. The second technique involved grafting Chris's head onto the body double. This technique was used mostly when Chris was sitting or lying down, or when a minimum of physical acting was required. Chris Evans and Sebastian Stan are the same height in real life, but when Steve's body was enhanced, a camera trick was used to make Steve look much taller than Bucky. Cap's shield was made 4 different ways in the film: metal, fiberglass, rubber, and computer graphics. Prop master Barry Gibbs told Newsday, "We had the hero shield, which was made of aluminum, for our beauty shots and close-up work. We then created a lighter shield that was aluminum faced with a fiberglass back for use on a daily basis, and then we had a sun shield made of polyurethane, which is sort of a synthetic rubber, and we made an ultra soft one we put on Evan's back, so if there were an accident, it wouldn't hurt him." In certain shots, Evan would throw and defend with a real shield during rehearsals, and then they would take it out of his hands and shoot him just miming the motions so that they could then add a digital shield in post. Hugo Weaving wore a prosthetic latex mask on set, and then visual effects later shaped his sunken face further. The filming wrapped in December 2010 after 6 months. The cast and crew returned for reshoots in the UK, New York, and Los Angeles in April 2011, including one day filming on location in Times Square. The movie includes nearly 1,600 visual effects shots executed by 13 different companies. Alan Silvestri was hired to compose the film's music. This was his first collaboration with Marvel Studios. He'd go on to write copyright the legendary Avengers theme. Paramount went all out with the marketing. In February 2011, it ran a $3 million Super Bowl ad for the film, and during New York City Fleet Week in May, it hired the USO girls from the movie to perform aboard the USS Intrepid Museum. Sega put out a tie-in video game, Captain America Super Soldier, on July 19th for Xbox 360, PS3, the Wii, and Nintendo DS. And then 3 days later, Captain America: The First Avenger opened on 3,751 screens in the United States. It grossed $65 million opening weekend domestic, landing at number 1, before going on to do $370 million total worldwide. The movie would gross even more on DVD and Blu-ray. In its first week, it did $52.6 million in sales. When Paramount distributed the film internationally, it offered foreign markets the option to drop Captain America from the title and just have the title be The First Avenger. Only 3 markets took them up on that offer: Russia, South Korea, and Ukraine. Critics really like the movie. Today, 80% of the 273 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive. The movie did not get nominated for Best Visual Effects at the Oscars, but it did win Outstanding Compositing in a Feature Motion Picture at the Visual Effects Society Awards. Original Captain America creator Joe Simon was 98 years old when the movie came out, and he did get to see it in a private screening just 5 months before he passed away. The first Avengers' success solidified Marvel's path to the Avengers, which was already full steam ahead by the time of its release, and led to sequels The Winter Soldier and Civil War. Steve Rogers would then remain a main character in the Infinity Saga through 2019's Endgame. But the first Avenger also spawned a TV series spin-off, Agent Carter, who would also get iterated into Captain Britain in animation and live action, and eventually the Falcon and Winter Soldier miniseries, which saw Sam Wilson ascend to be the new Captain America, leading to the 4th Captain America film, Brave New World, in theaters February 14th, 2025.